Before we begin, I want to ask you something. If you're someone who enjoys emotional stories about family, love, and the difficult moments that quietly shape our lives, then take a second and subscribe to the channel. Because not every story arrives with drama and loud moments. Some stories move slowly. They unfold in silence. And sometimes, they change us long before we even realize what's happening. Today's story is one of those. It isn't about shocking twists or dramatic betrayals. It's about something much quieter. Something many parents experience but rarely talk about. The moment when you realize the child you spent years protecting is no longer a child at all. And sometimes, that realization doesn't come gently. Sometimes it comes through a small moment. A quiet hallway. A half-open door. And a truth you weren't prepared to face. My name is Meline. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my life, I've been a single mother. My son Zion is 19 now. But for almost 2 decades, it was just the two of us against the world. When Zion was born, I remember holding his tiny hand in the hospital room. He was so small that his fingers wrapped around mine like he was afraid to let go. And in that moment, while the room was quiet and the world felt impossibly big, I made a promise to myself. No matter what happens, I will protect this child. No matter how hard life gets, I will make sure he feels safe. At the time, I didn't fully understand what that promise would cost. Because raising a child alone isn't just about love. It's about sacrifice. Endless sacrifice. There were nights when I worked double shifts just to make sure the rent was paid. There were weekends when friends invited me on trips, vacations, dinners, and I stayed home instead. Not because I wanted to miss those things, but because Zion needed new shoes, or school supplies, or because babysitters were expensive, and I trusted almost no one. I learned how to fix things around the house because there wasn't anyone else to call. Leaky pipes, broken shelves, a washing machine that stopped working at the worst possible moment. YouTube tutorials became my best friend long before most people even thought of them that way. And honestly, I never complained. Because every sacrifice felt worth it. Zion wasn't just my son. He was my purpose. When Zion was little, he followed me everywhere. I mean everywhere. If I walked into the kitchen, he was right behind me. If I sat down on the couch, he climbed up beside me within seconds. Sometimes he'd sit on the kitchen counter while I cooked dinner, swinging his little legs and asking 1,000 questions. Why does water boil? Why do birds fly? Why do adults drink coffee even though it smells weird? And I always answered. Even when I was exhausted. Even when I didn't really know the answers. Because those moments mattered. At night, we had a tradition. Every Friday was movie night. We'd order cheap pizza, turn off the lights, and curl up on the couch together. Half the time he didn't even finish the movie. He'd fall asleep halfway through, leaning against my shoulder. Those were the moments when I felt like I understood everything about him. I knew his fears. I knew his dreams. I knew which cartoon character he wanted to be when he grew up. I knew which teacher he liked and which one he thought was too strict. Back then there were no secrets. His world was small, and I was at the center of it. But childhood doesn't stay forever. And change doesn't usually happen overnight. It happens slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. At first, I didn't notice it. Zion started spending more time in his room. The door that used to stay open most of the day was now closed more often. Headphones replaced conversations. Video games replaced movie nights. And the long talks we used to have at the kitchen table became shorter. Much shorter. How was school? Fine. What did you do today? Nothing much. Typical teenager answers. Everyone told me it was normal. Friends, co-workers, even parenting blogs online. Teenagers need space. Teenagers become independent. Teenagers pull away. So I told myself not to worry. But even when something is normal, it doesn't mean it's easy. Because every small step toward independence felt like a step further away from me. Then came that Tuesday night. Nothing about the day itself was unusual. Work had been long. The house was quiet. Dinner was simple. Just another normal evening. But around 9:30 p.m., something felt strange. Zion's room was silent. Usually, I could hear something from down the hallway. Music. A video game. A YouTube video playing loudly. But that night? Nothing. Just silence. At first, I ignored it. Maybe he fell asleep early. Maybe he went out and I didn't notice. But the feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. Parents know this feeling. It's that quiet instinct. That small voice inside your mind that whispers something isn't quite right. So eventually, I walked down the hallway. I didn't plan to invade his privacy. I didn't plan to interrupt anything. I just wanted to check if he was okay. I stood outside his door for a moment. My hand hovered near the handle. And looking back now, I realize I should have knocked. But I didn't. I pushed the door open slightly. Just a few inches. And in that brief moment, I saw enough to understand something important. My son wasn't a little boy anymore. I immediately stepped back, closed the door quietly, and walked away. My heart was racing, not because of what I saw, but because of what it meant. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the ceiling while the same thought repeated in my mind. Zion was growing up. And somehow, I hadn't prepared myself for that. For 19 years, I had been the person who solved every problem. The person who answered every question. The person who made every important decision. But suddenly, he was becoming someone who didn't need that anymore. And that realization felt strangely painful. Not because I wanted control, but because I realized something I hadn't admitted before. For almost 2 decades, being Zion's mother had been my entire identity. And if he didn't need me the same way anymore, then who was I supposed to be? The next morning felt strange. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just awkward. Zion came into the kitchen for breakfast. Usually he'd say something casual. Morning. Or ask if there was cereal left. But that day, he avoided eye contact. And I suddenly became very interested in the coffee machine. Adjusting buttons that didn't need adjusting. Pouring coffee slower than usual. We were both pretending everything was normal. But we both knew something had changed. Finally, he grabbed a piece of toast and headed toward the door. I'll be late for class, he said. Okay, I replied. And that was it. A conversation that lasted maybe 5 seconds. But it felt like 5 minutes. Later that afternoon, I stood outside his room again. This time I did something different. I knocked. Yeah, he called from inside. Can we talk for a minute? I asked. There was a short pause. Then he said okay. I walked inside and sat on the chair across from his desk. He looked uncomfortable. Honestly, I probably did too. So I decided to say the most important thing first. I owe you an apology, I said. He looked surprised. For what? I should have knocked last night, I continued. I didn't respect your privacy. And that was my mistake. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he shrugged slightly. It's fine, Mom. But I shook my head. No. It's more than that. I took a deep breath. I think I've been holding on too tightly. He frowned. What do you mean? And that question led to one of the most honest conversations we'd ever had. I looked at Zion and tried to find the right words. For a long time, I had believed that being a good mother meant always being involved, always knowing everything. But sitting there across from him, I realized something difficult. Love doesn't always mean being close. Sometimes love means stepping back. I've spent your whole life protecting you. I told him slowly. Making decisions for you. Fixing problems before you even knew they existed. Zion stayed quiet listening. And somewhere along the way, I continued. I think I forgot that one day you would have to make those decisions yourself. The room felt still. Then Zion said something that stayed with me long after that conversation ended. Mom, I'm not trying to push you away. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm just trying to figure out who I am. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Because in that moment, I realized something important. He wasn't distancing himself because he didn't care about me. He was doing something every young adult eventually has to do. He was building his own life. And sometimes, growth looks exactly like distance. About a week later, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. It was a quiet afternoon. I was cleaning the living room while Zion stepped outside to take the trash out. His phone was resting on the coffee table. Normally, I would never even notice it. After our conversation about privacy and boundaries, I had made a promise to myself to respect his space. But then the phone buzzed. Once. Then again. The screen lit up. At first, I ignored it. But when it buzzed for the third time, my eyes drifted toward the screen. And that's when I saw the name. A message preview appeared for a split second. Just enough for me to recognize it. My stomach tightened immediately. Because the person texting my son was someone I knew. Someone who definitely shouldn't have been messaging him like that. At first, I told myself I must be mistaken. Maybe it was someone with the same name. Maybe it was completely innocent. But that uneasy feeling returned. The same instinct parents feel when something doesn't sit right. Before I could think any further, the door opened. Zion walked back inside. And the moment he saw my face, his expression changed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied quickly. But even to my own ears, the answer sounded unconvincing. He looked at me carefully. Then his eyes moved to the phone on the table. After a short pause, he asked quietly, "Did you see my phone?" The question caught me off guard. "I just saw it light up," I admitted. "I wasn't trying to read anything." Zion nodded slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he let out a long breath and sat down across from me. "There's something I should probably tell you," he said. And suddenly my heart started racing. The room felt smaller somehow, like the air had gotten heavier. Zion looked down at his hands for a moment before speaking again. "I didn't want to hide it from you," he said. "I just didn't know how you'd react." My mind jumped to 100 different possibilities. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. He took a breath. "I've been talking to someone." That alone wouldn't normally worry a mother. He was 19. Talking to someone was normal. But the name I had seen on the phone kept echoing in my mind. And I knew this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. "Who?" I asked gently. Zion hesitated. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then finally, he said the name. And the moment I heard it, everything inside me froze. Because it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a girl from college. It was someone connected to our lives. Someone older. Someone who absolutely should have known better. For several seconds, I didn't react. I just sat there, processing. Trying to understand how something like this could even happen. "How did this start?" I asked quietly. Zion rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "We started talking online," he explained. "At first it was nothing serious." He continued slowly. "Just conversations. Advice. Talking about life, school, things like that." I listened carefully. "But then?" I asked. He looked down again. Then the conversation started getting more personal. The words hung in the air between us. I leaned back in my chair and tried to stay calm, because reacting emotionally wouldn't help anyone. And the truth was, Zion looked just as confused as I felt. "I didn't think it was weird at first," he said. "They were just easy to talk to. And then one day," he continued quietly, "it felt like something changed." I understood what he meant without him needing to explain further. Sometimes relationships shift gradually. One conversation becomes two. Advice becomes emotional support. And before anyone realizes it, boundaries begin to blur. For the first time during the conversation, I felt a mixture of emotions rising inside me. Concern, fear, and something else. Responsibility. Because situations like this are complicated. Zion was legally an adult. But emotionally he was still figuring out the world. And the person he mentioned should have known that. "You know why this worries me, right?" I asked carefully. Zion nodded immediately. "Yeah," he said. "But it wasn't like that at first." That sentence stayed with me. Not at first. Sometimes people don't cross lines immediately. Sometimes those lines move slowly, little by little, until suddenly you realize they're gone. "Are you being pressured into anything?" I asked. He shook his head quickly. "No. Nothing like that." His answer was sincere. But something still didn't feel right. In that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't a situation where anger would solve anything. If I reacted with accusations or control, Zion would simply shut down. and the trust we had built over years could disappear in minutes. So instead, I said something different. You know I'm not your enemy, right? Zion looked up. I know. I'm not here to control your life, I continued. I'm here to help you see things clearly. He stayed quiet, listening. Sometimes parenting teenagers isn't about giving orders. Sometimes it's about helping them think. You deserve relationships with people who respect you, I told him. People who see you as an equal. Not someone who influences you simply because they're older. For the first time, Zion seemed to really think about what I was saying. The silence stretched for a while. Then Zion finally spoke. I think part of me already knew it was strange. He looked thoughtful. But I liked having someone to talk to. I nodded. That's normal. Everyone wants to feel understood, especially during times when life feels confusing. But I guess, he continued slowly, I never stopped to ask why they were talking to me that way. That realization mattered. Because the moment someone begins questioning a situation, they're already seeing it differently. What do you want to do now? I asked. He thought for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. I think I should end the conversation. And right there in front of me, he did. He typed a short message. Clear. Respectful. But final. Then he blocked the number. After that conversation, Zion and I sat together in the living room for a long time. Neither of us spoke much. But the tension that had filled the room earlier was gone. In its place was something else. Understanding. Because that day, I learned something about parenting that no book had ever explained properly. The hardest part of raising a child isn't protecting them from every possible mistake. You can't do that forever. The hardest part is trusting them to learn. Trusting them to make decisions. Trusting that the values you spent years teaching them will guide them when things become complicated. Zion didn't need me to control his life. He needed me to be someone he could talk to without fear. Later that night, Zion stopped by the kitchen while I was making tea. Mom, he said. Yeah. Thanks for not freaking out earlier. I smiled slightly. I considered it, I joked. He laughed. And for the first time in a while, the house felt the way it used to. Comfortable. Safe. Not because Zion was still a child, but because our relationship had changed into something new. Something stronger. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't know when Zion was born. When you hold your child for the first time, you promise to protect them forever. But no one tells you that protecting them doesn't always mean shielding them from the world. Sometimes it means teaching them how to face the world themselves. Sometimes it means stepping back, listening, and trusting that the person you raised is capable of making the right choices. Zion is still my son. He always will be. But he's also his own person now. And strangely enough, that realization doesn't scare me anymore. Because if the past 19 years have taught me anything, it's that the boy I raised is becoming a man I can truly respect. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this. And remember, sometimes the hardest part of love is learning when to hold on and when to let go.